Present, with the exception of Commissioner Ogle by appointment. Do we have a determination of legal notice?
All items have been properly noticed.
Is there a director's report?
Madam Chair, members of the Planning Commission, yes, I have a brief director's report, and as you know that every time we meet, I provide the Commission with a fire recovery report on what the department is working on. So I just wanted to quickly advise the Planning Commission that we've actually issued 27 permits in the burn area, and we have 35 right now. They're in queue for processing. So we're actually starting to see the rebuilding. I actually was through Redwood Valley over the weekend and noticed at least 3 homes that are well on their way to a completion stage right now. So things are moving out there. We've had 61 recreational vehicle permits, or admin permits as we call them, for temporary occupancy of a trailer coach. And so far we've issued 50 of those. So what you're going to see throughout the burn area also are travel trailers that are located out in that area. And again, the idea was to be able to get people back onto their properties. As far as the county effort, as far as the private cleanup, through County Environmental Health, we've had 21 properties that have been that have gone through to completion of the private cleanup efforts. 28 have been applied for. So last I understood from the reports coming from the Army Corps of Engineers is that most everything has been cleaned in the area except for 5, and these were the most difficult sites that they had to get to. So that's the fire update. As far as some of the other things that the department is working on, this coming Tuesday we are bringing forth an item for discussion which is centered around accessory dwelling units and the vacation rentals item. It's basically a for direction on the rewrite of Chapter 20.164. So this is coming forward, and basically the department is seeking direction from the board as to how to best approach this. We've got some revised language that we're going to run by the board, but this is now moving in that direction. With that said, we've already begun discussions with the Coastal Commission to speak about accessory dwelling units in the coastal zone. So the idea is to address the inland first and then move to the coastal zone and try to work on those as well. We know there's going to be challenges with the Coastal Commission on these because we go back to the 1985 LCP that was adopted, and it did not provide for second units. But we do have changes in state law that have occurred that basically say you have to provide for these accessory dwelling units to meet the housing needs of the state. However, I think what we're seeing is we've got one body of a state agency, HCD, who says this is what you need to do. You've got the governor's office who's pushing for affordable housing, but you have the Coastal Commission who is interpreting things a little differently. So this is one of those, I'll say, challenges that we're caught in the middle. So I will be reporting on that periodically to the Commission. So unless you have any questions, that would conclude my director's report.
Anyone have? Go ahead.
When is the meeting on the accessory dwelling units at the supervisors?
That's this Tuesday. We're going. It's an item for discussion. It's not not to bring anything forward for formal adoption. What it is to bring forth what we've been working on and to spur a discussion with the board so that they give us direction.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Any other questions for the director? Thank you.
Thank you.
This is the part of the meeting where the Planning Commission welcomes participation in commission meetings. This item is limited to matters under the jurisdiction of the commission that are not on the posted agenda and items which have not already been considered by the commission. No action can be taken. Is there anyone who wishes to address the commission at this time? Seeing no one, we will move on. We had an information item, and Chief Chris Wilkes will not be able to be with us for his item this morning, so we will reschedule that if we can. We will move on to item 6, the consent calendar, which has no items. And so we will move to the regular calendar, case U 2017-0020.
Good morning, Commissioners. Mary Lynn Hunt, Planning and Building Services. I'd like to introduce Susan Summerford. She'll be presenting the coastal development use permit for the daycare center. Good morning, Commissioners. Oh, that light. There you go. Okay. Good morning, Commissioners. This is a use permit for a coastal development to legalize a existing daycare facility and to expand the use to be a small school. It is located southwest of Fort Bragg City Center at the intersection of Del Mar Drive and Ocean View Drive. And the CEQA determination is that it's categorically exempt under section 15332, infill development project. The applicant is seeking to legalize an existing state licensed daycare located within a residence and to establish a use for a small school at the same site. No site improvements are being proposed, no new construction. The applicant is proposing to operate daily from 7:45 to 5:15. There are half and full day programs available to the students, and they will be between 2 and 6 years of age. The subject site, the subject site also, I want to offer you a cough drop or some water. I apologize. In your packet, you can see that the applicant has proposed a site plan with the required 4 parking spaces for the use. And access to the parcel is taken from Del Mar Drive. The site is currently occupied as primarily a residential use with a state licensed large family daycare already in operation. So the scope of this use permit is also to legalize that use and to expand to be a small school that will serve no more than 25 children. The public services that serve this site are CAL FIRE, and the proposal is consistent with land use for rural residential. Rural residential district is for residential and associated utilities like agricultural and home occupations. And the daycare use is seen as compatible with the home occupation and is permissible in the rural residential district with the benefit of a use permit. It will continue to serve the community. And we have several letters from both neighbors and parent patrons of the school indicating that they haven't had any issues with site circulation, parking, drop-off, and queuing, or noise or anything associated with schools or small daycares or large daycare. And since the project has already been in existence for a number of years, I think we can rely on those things as we go forward. With the recommended conditions of approval proposed by staff, the daycare and small school uses are consistent with the purpose and intent of the zoning district, as well as the general plan. Are there any questions?
Any questions? No? Sounds like not. Stick around though, just in case.
Okay.
Now is the applicant's opportunity to come forward and speak to the project if they would like to. Seeing no one, we will open the public hearing on this matter. If any members of the public would like to address this item. Seeing no one, we'll close the public hearing and look for discussion and a motion.
I think the project looks great. I drive by it often when I go out to watch whales, and my only concern had been with the parking, but it looks like it's going to be met fine without being in the county right away.
Yes, the proposed parking is allowed to be in the front setback, and they've striped it and shown on the site plan that it fits.
So that would be it. I think it's a great project for the community.
Lord knows there needs more daycare on the coast.
Exactly. So with that, let's see if I can find the motion. Planning Commission grants use permit U 2017-0020 as proposed by the applicant and based on the facts and findings and subject to the conditions of approval, and approves the resolution in the exhibit.
Second?
Second.
Steve seconds. Okay.
Commissioner Hall,
Yes.
Commissioner Warner,
Yes.
Commissioner Purnell,
Yes.
Commissioner Nelson,
Yes.
Commissioner Kruger,
Yes.
Chair Holtkamp.
Yes.
Motion carries 6-0.
Thank you, Commissioners.
Next up is case MS 2017-0003.
Good morning, Madam Chair, Commissioners. My name is Sam Vandewater, staff planner with the Planning Department. Before you, I have case MS 2017-0003. This is let me just put this on full screen. Applicant and owner Clark McGeehee is requesting a subdivision of a 9.34 acre parcel into 2 new parcels and a remainder. They would range in size from 3.1 to 5.33 acres, the smallest being 0.91 acres. It is located north of Ukiah downtown on North State Street, on the east side of North State Street across from Parducci Road. The general plan is currently commercial with a zoning of limited industrial. The parcel is relatively developed with a manufacturing facility up in this northwest corner, storage facility on the eastern parcel, and the southwest is relatively undeveloped but is still utilized for industrial and commercial purposes. For public services, it has access directly onto North State Street. It is covered by the Ukiah Valley Fire Protection District. It has a water and sewer district, which is the Millview District. And because of these accesses to public services, the project is deemed exempt from a CEQA review under a Class 15 small division of land exemption. With regard to the division of land regulations, the project went to the June 8th subdivision committee and received an approval from the committee to move forward. With regards to the general plan and zoning consistency, its zoning is located in I-1, which is what is surrounding the parcel. However, for general plan, it is a commercial surrounded by industrial general plan zoning. The reason for this is when the Ukiah Valley area plan was adopted, there was a change for this parcel from an industrial zoning to a commercial zoning. Through some research, it was uncertain why this change had occurred. There was no reasoning behind the change. It just was adopted with the Ukiah Valley area plan. However, given this inconsistency, We have included a condition number 20, which states that any future development will need a rezone or a general plan amendment before proceeding with any of that future development. So staff does still continue to recommend approval for the project.
Any questions?
I had a couple questions, Vandy.
Sure.
Regarding condition number 20, would the cost of that rezoning have to be borne by the applicant or by the county since something got goofed up in the UVAP?
Unfortunately, it would still be the applicant, but not necessarily. It would be whoever is intending to do a development on that parcel. There is currently two existing businesses. There is a storage facility as well as a manufacturer, and those could continue as non-conforming at the moment. Should they expand, they would need to have a use permit for that. But if I go back to the proposed parcels, this small parcel in the corner is undeveloped at the moment. If someone should intend to buy that and develop it, they would have to either rezone or do a general plan amendment to bring the parcel into consistency.
Okay, thank you. And I had another question, and it was about, I did not see in the conditions here the Fish and Wildlife fee. Is that because of the CEQA categorical exemption?
That is.
Okay, thank you.
Anyone else? Okay, we would like to hear from the applicant now, if the applicant is present and would like to speak to the commission. Nope. Okay. I guess we'll open the public hearing. If any members of the public would like to speak to this item, now would be the time. Seeing no one, we'll close the public hearing. And bring it back to the commission. Anyone have comments, questions?
No, I see the reasoning. I mean, I see why the property owner would want to split, and I don't think there's any detrimental.
Sounds like things are just going to go on and they're just going to try and use their unused part.
Right.
The one question I had in understanding all the zoning stuff is if someone wants to expand on that parcel one, do they have to seek a zoning amendment if they're doing a commercial operation or only if they're doing an industrial?
No, and I mean, unless it's a project that's consistent in both zonings, I would imagine you would have to do a rezone or a general plan amendment
And choose
regardless.
one or the other.
Yeah.
Thank you. All right, well. This first.
I wonder how many other parcels we did like that.
Right.
I hope not.
There
many.
are a number. I have
there
other
some?
projects with
Yeah.
similar issues.
That are inconsistent between our general plan and the UVAP, or?
Correct.
So, if I may, Mary Lynn Hunt, Planning and Building. When UVAP was adopted, it did not rezone the properties. It only changed the general plan. So we have many inconsistencies. I think if you remember, Faison did a project out at Jensen's Truck Stop. Inconsistent. We will see these. And the intent of it was that the county would do the general plan and that it would be the property owner's responsibility to come forward and do the rezoning at such time as they were developing. So many inconsistencies.
And Mary Lynn, most of those were requests from the current property owners. weren't they?
That is correct.
Yeah.
They are there.
I can do it. It's Maryland's district, right?
Will somebody do it?
Sure. By resolution, the Planning Commission, the Planning Commission adopt the categorical exemption and grant minor subdivision MS 2017-003 0003 for the project based on the approved project description, facts and findings,
Go ahead.
and subject to the conditions
wait
of
till I finish.
approval in Exhibit A.
I apologize. There was one edit to the resolution. The third to last resolution currently reads, be it further resolved that the Planning Commission hereby grants the requested use permit. That should be changed to the Planning Commission hereby grants the requested minor subdivision. I apologize.
That's what you
So moved, yeah, that's,
So I'll second the amended motion.
Okay.
Commissioner Nelson,
Yes.
Commissioner Hall,
yes.
Commissioner Kruger,
Yes.
Commissioner Warner,
Yes.
Commissioner Purnell.
Yes.
Chair Holdcamp,
Yes.
motion carries 6-0.
Thank you, Madam Chair and Commissioners.
And now we move on to case MS 2017-0008.
Good morning, Commissioners. My name is Jesse Davis, Planner 3 with the Department of Planning and Building Services. Today I would like to present to you Minor Subdivision 2017-0008. When describing this project in the application materials, the owner applicant, Mr. Apperson, indicated that this was a quote-unquote simple two-lot split. Today, after submitting this application originally on June 24th, 2017, staff is prepared to recommend that this minor subdivision be approved with conditions. Given that there are no significant impacts to the environment identified, a negative declaration was prepared and included in the documents for your review. The applicant proposes a minor subdivision of a 5.81 sized acre lot into two parcels, being sized 2.15 acres and 3.65 acres respectively. This minor subdivision is located south of Redwood Valley Town Center, lying directly east on East Side Road or County Road number 230. It's 1 mile north of its intersection with Highway 20, and it's addressed at 930 Lone Pine Road. In general, the subject property complies with the rural residential land use zoning categorization. Given the parcel's history, zoning request, and acreage, subdivision has long been an expectation for this parcel. This is further substantiated by the extensive history of related cases on this site, beginning with General Plan Amendment 24 from 1988. That General Plan Amendment proposed a change from Rural Residential 5 to Rural Residential 2 in zoning designations. Perhaps the most complicated aspect of this project were its transportation-related elements. However, after extensive discussions with all agencies, including the Mendocino County Department of Transportation, CAL FIRE, and the Redwood Valley Capella Fire Protection District, these agencies maintaining an interest in access-related conditions, they've all had an opportunity to comment and provide input. The application, minor sub 217-0008, or CAL FIRE number 2249-17, was initially reviewed by CAL FIRE in June of 2017, and all specific project conditions were affirmed by Joss Kitchens of CAL FIRE on March 1st of 2018. Additionally, staff would like to present to you a memo for your review that includes 2 conditions that were inadvertently omitted from the resolution, and we'd like to present these for approval as well. These conditions were inadvertently omitted but were previously discussed during the application review process. The Department of Planning and Building requests that recommended condition number 30 be included. This is a condition of the Division of Environmental Health, and it requires an acceptable standard mineral analysis be performed by a certified public health individual in terms of testing the water provided. Additionally, while discussed in the application materials, as well as briefly in the initial study, staff requests that the shared use of the well be further codified and that the following special condition be included. And this condition reads that the applicant shall prepare a legal agreement that will allow for shared use of the well by both parcels as found to be acceptable to both the County Division of Environmental Health and the County Office of the County Council. This recommended condition by Environmental Health was given the fact that the proposed subdivision would utilize a shared well, and we felt more comfortable with codifying this language and request. At this time, I'm happy to address any questions you have with regards to this minor subdivision.
Yes.
Yeah, the water analysis, is it because of the serpentine rock, or?
I defer to Environmental Health to address that question more formally, but essentially this is a standard condition that's often applied, and unfortunately it was just inadvertently admitted when I was compiling the resolution. It's a standard condition
Oh, okay, okay.
I'd be happy to talk a little.
Would you please? I just don't recall seeing the compounds to be tested for listed like this, but maybe they have been.
Good morning, Commissioners. Marlena Dooley, Environmental Health. Anytime the water source for a minor or a major subdivision is a private water source, we ask for a quantity test as well as a quality test. Those items, the specific minerals listed, are pulled from the Land Division Guidelines for Environmental Health, and they have been there. They just have sneaked past you. And if any of them are high, it's recorded on the final map that further treatment of the water may be required for high levels of iron or whatnot. And that's part of Environmental Health's final letter to Planning and Building when the applicant has met those conditions. And it was on their subdivision conditions and discussed then. It just was a typo between there and here.
While you're there,
Yeah.
I think that usually you do not prefer shared wells with subdivisions. And I can see why there may be problems with maintenance or...
And we've seen parcels change hands and it be unclear to the new property owners who has rights to what. So we've been trying to work with the facts that we're in drought conditions, and either it's drill more wells or share the water we currently have. And that's something that is a bigger overarching topic, our water in the whole county. Right. There's nothing that strictly prohibits it at this time, but we are certainly wanting to see clarity between tied to the parcels that says this parcel has rights for so much water at this water source on this other parcel that can follow through the sale of that land to other parties.
And when the legal document is prepared, will it separate the quantity allowed at each parcel, actually?
Typically, we have not gotten that much detail.
Right.
I've worked with County Council on a few of these because deeded easements and water agreements are not my forte necessarily, and County Council's certainly been helpful. It's something we've talked about. Some sites have a 2-parcel split or a 3-parcel split, and they'll say half the water, and we've left it at that. We haven't gotten exact gallonage per year,
right,
because that can change over time.
Of course.
And I don't know if County Council wants to add anything else. Okay.
No, that explains it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. I guess actually I have one more question.
Nice.
And I don't know if it's for you. There's so much environmental health. It's more related to the driveway.
Mm-hmm.
I'm wondering if there will be some new construction for building turnarounds and such. Is that correct?
Correct.
But everybody has felt that there's room to do that and that it can be accomplished.
That's correct. I have affirmation from all agencies that have an interest in access-related easements. And I think, again, part of the confusion surrounding the driveway was the location of the building site. That is called out actually on the provided and prepared tentative map in terms of where that likely future building site would be located. And there is an included turnaround, a new hammerhead turnaround to be built in accordance with Department of Transportation requirements. Partially, I think that the confusion was generated by the vocabulary. Again, a driveway versus a roadway, and where that likely building site was going to be. If you look at the parcel, the provided tentative map, you can see that the likely future building site is right off of the existing road, essentially right off of East Road in particular, excuse me. As a result, that would be considered where the turnaround and all of that would be implied. And Department of Transportation is also here to address any specific questions that you may have.
Okay. No, I think that covers it.
Jesse, I've got a question about
Of
that
course.
hammerhead turnaround. It looks like it's gonna cross the dividing parcel line. Has that been an issue?
I see that as well. There's another more specific transportation-related map that was submitted to Department of Transportation. I believe that was included as one of the exhibits, if not. But I'm not sure how the Department of Transportation would address that situation.
Good morning, Commissioners. Amber Munoz, Department of Transportation. It doesn't matter to us if the hammerhead turnaround is shared between two parcels, as long as there's an easement provided and all parcels have access to use that easement. It doesn't matter that it's split between the two parcels.
Thank you.
Any other questions for staff? At this point, we'd be happy to hear from the applicant if they would care to speak to this issue.
Hi, this is Jim Atkinson. I don't have too much to say. I'll say it down here, I guess.
We like to get you on tape with your name.
Jim Apperson. I don't have too much to say other than I really would appreciate your help with this. I've been trying to do this for 25 years, and it's just to build a house for my daughter. And I've just been having one problem with it after another. So it seemed pretty simple to me, but you know, that's all. Thank you.
Okay, thanks.
Oh, and my intention also is to put in a separate well for that parcel. That will more than likely be done. This particular well that I may share has run 6 different households at one time. There's a group of apartments next door that was that this well serviced. So it's a good enough well to do that.
Okay, sounds good. Any members of the public? I would like to open the public hearing. Are there any members of the public that would like to address this item? Seeing no one, we will close the public hearing and bring it back to the commission for any discussions.
If we're ready for a motion, I guess I'll make the motion.
Okay.
By resolution, the Planning Commission adopts a negative declaration and grants subdivision MS 2017-0008 grants approval as proposed by the applicant based on the facts and findings and subject to the conditions of approval in the latest
As modified at hearing, adding conditions 27 and 28.
Thank you. And the resolution will be the latest resolution copy that we received today.
Second.
Commissioner Hall,
Yes.
Commissioner Warner,
Yes.
Commissioner Purnell,
Yes.
Commissioner Nelson,
Yes.
Commissioner Kruger,
Yes.
Chair Holtcamp.
Yes.
Thank you, Commissioners.
And I think we will take this opportunity to have a 10-minute recess before we take up our final item.
Always a good idea.
Mendocino is,
You just turned
sounds
yours
like we're gonna start. Go ahead. Thanks, Paul.
You guys ready?
Off is up.
Okay.
Or on is-
We are going to come back to order and consider ordinance amendment 2018-0005.
Good morning, Commissioners. Mary Lynn Hunt, Planning and Building Services. Today you have before you Ordinance Amendment 2018-0005. It's an amendment to the Mendocino County Code, Chapter 6.36, Cannabis Facilities Businesses, which is part of the tax collector's ordinance with regards to business licenses, and Chapter 22.43, Cannabis Facilities of the Inland Mendocino County Code. On October 17th, 2017, the board adopted Chapter 20.243, Cannabis Facilities, and Chapter 6.36. This was with regards to cannabis dispensing, retail, distribution, processing, testing, and manufacturing. It took effect November 16th, 2017. Recently, direction was given to county staff to amend this ordinance, and what you have before you today are several recommendations for change. On page 2 of the staff memo, I'm going to go through them fairly quickly here. While we have both ordinances in front of you today, really you'll probably concentrate on Chapter 20 because that is the zoning code. The ordinance currently uses the phrase medical and adult use throughout. We are now taking that out of the ordinance, so it will just be cannabis use. Cannabis facilities are prohibited within 1,000 feet of a youth-oriented facility, a school or park, or any church or residential treatment facility. The proposal is to now have that the applicant would be able to apply for a reduction through administrative permit process to reduce that buffer. There's a lot of discussion in our changes with regards to microbusiness. Microbusinesses was kind of our tough cookie to really take a look at. We are still in the process of reviewing changes. There's a lot of stuff coming down from the state that's going to change things. So I foresee that you will have this back before you again in the near future to really address microbusinesses more definitely. There is a distribution, transport only, and distribution licenses would be allowed in any zoning district as an accessory use to the cultivation site. Right now, distribution's kind of a distribution facility is through the planning process is considered a fleet storage. They would be storing all their vehicles and transporting from that site to and from. A transport for distribution for just your product is something different. It's really an accessory. You have to transport your product from site to distribution center, or excuse me, to manufacturing. So there's kind of two different levels there. Distribution facilities would be more, you would see those in industrial sites. We don't want a distribution facility set up in a rangeland zoning district that there's no other use going on, just a distribution facility. We would not want to see that. But you should be allowed to distribute your product from site to your processing or manufacturing facility. There's also a non-storefront retail, and this would be allowed as an accessory use, and that could be, if you have a cultivation site, you could have a non-storefront retail. You could sell product from your property, but you wouldn't be having customers come to your site. You would be just selling from your site and then taking your product to maybe a dispensary or to I think to a private person also. So if you had a private person, you were, I want to say like a patient. There's a lot of minor rewording throughout the document, and you'll see that in the red line version of the ordinance. Like I say, this is a work in product in the process of being reworked. As far as the CEQA requirements, we're recommending that the current proposed changes continue to be found exempt under the general rule CEQA exemption. And we're amending our, we'll do a CEQA amendment, addendum, CEQA addendum. And also that the, is that correct, or is it just, this is the exemption, sorry. So there will not be an addendum to the CEQA document. We are just saying that it's exempt under the general rule. Sorry. Okay, so as far as the general plan is consistent with the 2009 Mendocino County Code, our Mendocino County General Plan. We are looking for a recommendation from the Planning Commission. This will be going on to the Board of Supervisors for their final approval. So I have one other item that I'd like to discuss. And we talk about, you know, sometimes that staff makes mistakes. So several meetings ago, the Planning Commission heard the ordinance amendment for facilities, exemption for facilities, and it was for facilities that were a reuse. And we used the Fetzer Winery as an example out in Redwood Valley. There was a manufacturing facility that was going to be, we added the word, we struck, let's see, we struck the word manufacturing, let me see, I know, it was regarding Williamson Act and Ag Preserve policies and procedures. We added the word manufacturing as a compatible use. We had asked the commission at that time to also add in some wording, and I read it to you during the meeting, and I'm going to read it to you right now. So it was manufacturing, and it was including distribution facilities in conjunction with processing and manufacturing facilities. So it was in conjunction with an existing manufacturing, not a distribution facility on its own, but just in conjunction with manufacturing. The Planning Commission then took the resolution and directed staff to include this in the resolution, and we were to take that to the Board of Supervisors for approval. However, that wording never made it to the Board of Supervisors, so they did not include that into the ag policies and procedures. So at this time, for staff purposes and for our review of projects, we've always had distribution as an accessory to manufacturing, but we wanted it to be kind of clear in the ag policies and procedures. It didn't make it there. We apologize for that. We would like to continue on and at some point update the ag policies and procedures again and then add this wording into it. But staff does not feel at this time that this would be a problem because we do consider it an accessory. We have accessory uses in our existing zoning ordinance, and it's no different than I'll say a structure that's being built within a Williamson Act piece of property that may be an accessory structure. It's not really noted in our ag policies and procedures, but it's kind of a common sense. It is an accessory to a residence or to the agricultural operation. So with that, I apologize that that language was not included in the resolution to the board, and I'm just making you aware of it, and that at some point you will see this come back to you. And I think legal counsel would like to speak to that.
Deputy County Counsel Matthew Kudrowski, just to add to that, when we reviewed this and thought about what we were doing today for the facilities, we really think that the vast majority of these issues are taken care of in the facilities ordinance and the amendments being brought today. The issue of because we're talking about the issues on Williamson Act properties and how that interacts with cannabis facilities. So primarily the issue came up in the exceptions process. That's section 070 of chapter 20.243. There we deleted this requirement that these existing packing and processing facilities need to not be on Williamson Act. So in doing that, well, that section talks about any cannabis facilities can be an existing packing and processing facility can be reused for any cannabis facility, which would include a distribution, but it's tied to everything else we're doing on that site. So we thought in that situation, this is reusing an existing packing facility. That's what it was done for previously. That winery had trucks going in and out of it previously. So there's nothing new in that aspect of it. Secondarily, we've added in some language specifically in front of you today saying that your distribution, self-distribution or distribution transport only, those are accessory uses regardless of the zone. So areas that might have your Williams Act contracts, your rangeland, TPZ, and forest land, we're already taking care of those places as well, where you're having a micro business or a small business, but and you're looking at distribution for your own product as a part of that. So in thinking of the conflicts that may arise, we think the ordinance that the Williams Act policies and procedures were amended to have this reference to processing and manufacturing as allowed by Chapter 20.243. And we're thinking that we're allowing this distribution as an accessory by virtue of the language in Chapter 20.243 that should take care of the vast majority of situations. For clarity, we can go back to the Williams Act policies at a later date. That does require renoticing in terms of a larger process as part of that. But after reviewing this for the last week or so, between myself and Mary Lynn, we think that the zoning ordinance as in front of you is taking care of the situations where there may have been a concern.
So I'd just like to give a little background about, I know that you've received several comments today from different interests, and I don't know if everyone's aware of how some of the cannabis information comes about. At an early point in this process, the Board of Supervisors established working groups, and they came up with lots of topics. They decided on their top 3 or 4 topics, and they broke into groups. Many of them have 10 to 20 people on these working groups, and one of them is state requirements. And those people, they meet usually on a monthly basis, and they discuss our ordinances, what's going on at the state, and they try to come up with solutions and new information that we may want to amend our document with. So a lot of the information that you see today as comments is coming from one of the working groups. And we just received most of this yesterday, staff, so we have not had time to really digest it. I know there's going to be some information in here that we will want to amend the ordinance again and possibly take that to the board. So, just reviewing it today, you may want to direct staff to take these into consideration and move them on to the Board of Supervisors. So we also have other working groups that are working on the overlay district. We had one that's working on building regulations. So they've been a very active group of people and coming up with solutions. They develop letters to the state Board of Cannabis to change stuff at the state level. So there's a very active group, and we do hear from them on a regular basis. Staff does sit on these working groups, and we hear a lot of information. A lot of it's very useful for what we're doing. So like I said, we have some good information that we've received. We just need time to really go through it and see if it will work with what we're doing. So just wanted to give you a little background.
So can we assume that you'll come back to us on these recommendations?
That's entirely up to you, however you want to do it. If you want us to take a look at these and then bring something back at a future meeting, we can do that before it goes to the board, or you can direct us to take some of these things into consideration and just take it to the board and you would not see it again. So it's entirely up to however you want to do it. I know there's a lot in here.
Yeah, I was just thinking I don't understand it well enough to deal with it today.
Okay. So that concludes.
Your feeling is that this is not a matter of great urgency for the supervisors either. They're not expecting this document next Tuesday or anything.
Well, they'd like it back immediately because people are trying to get their state licenses, and it's like they need this information now. I know that if we take this to the board, I think we decided we can't get it to them until the first part of May. Is that correct? So that's when we would be going to the board, is the first part of May with anything that happens today.
So I had a question on the second bullet. Is now the appropriate time to ask questions?
Unless you have more presentation
No,
you would like
that's
to make.
fine.
What would be an example of a reduction in the setback from 1,000 feet to less? I mean,
So-
there must be good reasons for reducing it, and I'm just wondering what that might be.
This was direction from the board. There's no set number. I think a lot of it is that they want staff to look at topography, to look at where, and I think one of the things that came to mind was, and I know what one of the issues was, there's some property in industrial zoning, however, and it's on a county maintained road. However, there is a daycare facility close by. Well, it's an industrial site, and it's the topography, and there's fencing, and there's all these other factors that come into play that maybe 1,000 feet is too far. What that number is, I can't tell you. It would be a case-by-case basis that staff would be looking at when they apply for their administrative permit. I know that a lot of times the number used was 600 feet. It's really a case-by-case basis, and if you want to establish a number, that's something you might want to look at. And I know that you'll hear from probably someone today regarding that, so you may want to listen to that and take that into consideration in making your decision. So,
also, Mary Ellen, wasn't the state law less than 1,000 feet?
I think it's at 600 feet, but I think they're allowing the counties to make their own
differences,
changes, their own decision about that.
So,
they didn't make it a minimum. They just said that was, I think, their recommended suggestion. And then, is it a minimum? Okay.
Deputy County Counsel Matthew Kudrowski. The state setback is 600. There is an allowance in the statute for differing amounts set by the locality, and we've even predating that. Our setback already included things not included in state law, things like churches, and there's a couple other items that are in there that, as far as I'm aware, are not common throughout the state. So we had a pre-existing setback that took those into account. I agree this is not intended to be a reduction of a certain percentage or of a certain number. I believe the board, their overall thought was if there's any intervening topography or barriers or things that could be taken into account, that would allow for a reduction in the setback.
Madam Secretary?
Yes.
I may be forgetting. I'm trying to recall what is the logic. Why do we have a setback? Is it security so that children aren't involved in something? Is it odor? Is it, what's the basis for this distance? Or is it just arbitrary?
I think it's a combination of things. And I think, for cultivation sites, we have a setback, and I believe that was reduced to it's 1,000? Okay. But there is an administrative permit to reduce that. So it's just like a zoning setback, we establish the setback and we adhere to it, and what the reasons for it, it's a multitude of things. I mean, when you have to think of the big picture of land use, you have to think of things that can go on. And I know for manufacturing facilities, if it's a volatile facility, is that important enough to keep the setback larger? I can't answer it specifically, but I think it's all those things together.
Thank you.
I've also been thinking about this because I think this is where we need to balance making our small homegrown businesses work and also protecting and preserving public health, safety, and welfare. So I've been thinking about all of the different scenarios, and even when it comes to manufacturing, it's also the non-volatile, because there was an explosion and it was a CO2 cartridge. It was the non-volatile component of this manufacturing that exploded, and so and that was a human error issue. That it was a state-of-the-art facility, but it was a human error. that resulted in that explosion and like the roof being blown off. And I just think that something, if there's the potential for that, or if there's the potential for any kind of law enforcement activity to come in, whether it be feds or whether it be local, there's still tons of confusion happening. I mean, I've had to drive through cannabis-related law enforcement operations in my neighborhood, and they're still running around in fatigues with fully automatic weapons. And when I've had to drive my girls through that, it's uncomfortable. I make the assumption that we're probably safe, but I don't really know. And so having schools and daycare facilities next to that, I don't think we know all the possibilities of what we're exposing people to. I just learned that friends of mine, their family were some of the members of the community in Santa Rosa area that were like hogtied and held up at gunpoint. And it's like, it starts to hit home that that it can be dangerous and that we need to protect the public health, safety, and welfare. And I really wish that we were in an era and lived in a world where this was just a plant that could be grown and there weren't risks associated with it. But I've personally seen enough, and I've had friends and family members be involved in, you know, enough of these issues where I think we have to take it seriously. So for me, that's where that setback really comes in. Any number feels like it's almost arbitrary. 600 feels arbitrary, 1,000 feels arbitrary, but the line has to be drawn somewhere. Because I would just feel absolutely terrible if we made it such an open slate that these activities could happen anywhere and then someone was injured or hurt because of it. So those are my thoughts on this.
Anyone else?
Well, yeah, I mean, I agree with what you've said, but there's this question in my mind. So, in what way is cannabis different from alcohol, for example? And that I'm aware of, there hasn't been over the years any reason to have a distillery have a setback before a school or anything else. I mean, is there some worry about addiction, or I mean, or is it mostly what you're talking about? If you're talking about a bust going on and so forth, that will change with the legalization in varying ways of cannabis production. If I don't get smacked. I mean, the discussion I heard before, the 1,000 feet could be less if there was a brush-filled canyon in between, I mean, or something that that effectively. But what is it we're trying to accomplish? I mean, I'm not arguing with what you're saying at all.
You can. It's okay.
You know, enough said.
So I understand better why there's that option to reduce the distance. If there's some barrier, then 1,000 feet may be too arbitrary.
So with an administrative permit, we would notify the facility that we're requiring the setback from, and their comments would weigh extremely heavily with staff on, you know, what the reduction would be. So they would be a part of the process.
And I should note that I'm totally comfortable with the special findings that are in here. So I think having this AP process is fair to all involved.
So we're going to go line by line? Or
Well, I thought we'd take public comment, and then if we need to
Okay.
go line
All
by
right.
line, some of them may not come up too much. I'm not sure. Any other comments from the commission or questions to staff before we open the public hearing? Yes.
Yeah, the table 1 on page 17. Is that something new that we are seeing? I don't recall seeing it before.
we've had this before.
We have, okay.
But it didn't always look exactly like
Uh-huh.
this.
Yeah, this is easy to read.
Yeah.
Yeah, I like the table. I think it makes sense. I just wondered if there was anything that you needed to explain to us about it. If there were any difficult decisions.
I don't, unless there is something that you have a question on.
Not really.
It has been part of the ordinance. It's nothing new. We did add in red, if you see the red part down, we've added some stuff with regards to the distribution, the non-storefront.
By red, do you mean
retail.
blue?
Well, you have a blue copy. Sorry.
Okay,
Sorry.
just
I
checking.
didn't know I was
Blue. Hopefully no one's colorblind. Okay. So I think,
I do have a,
Okay.
I don't understand one section, the,
Okay.
6A and 6M and 7A and 7N, that's not.
those are the different types of permits that would be required for those type of
Okay,
facilities.
all right, thanks.
So the manufacturing permits are 6A or 6M?
Correct.
Gotcha, okay. Any other questions for staff? I think at this point, I'm going to open the public hearing. I think we are going to do the 3-minute thing this time, but you might get 2 rounds. So anyway, any members of the public wishing to address this item, please step forward now. Looks like Ms. Bird is our first comer.
Hannah Nelson.
Nelson, oh, sorry.
It's okay. Good morning, Commissioners. Hannah Nelson. The reason why Mr. Kudrowski and Ms. Hunt and I were cracking up about the table is because the tables have been the bane of our existence for a while. And I did actually speak to them about, just for informational purposes, creating another table that shows all the exceptions and stuff, because I think that the average person looking at this wouldn't necessarily understand that there are actually, if you have the proper other kind of permit and you have the proper ancillary use, the chart might be a little bit different. So anyway, but that's why we were laughing when you said something about the table. And with respect to how soon you should, whether you should try and just give staff direction and pass it on to the Board of Supervisors, of course, we always appreciate your careful consideration, but time is of the essence. And what is going on is people are getting their state licenses, and we can't have state licenses until we have our local licenses. So that's holding people up. And so it's unfortunate that we have to kind of keep doing this catch up, but we are all in that situation. There's not enough time for anything. There's a few items, a lot of the items that I mentioned in my memo are really going to be brought up before the Board of Supervisors and are not necessarily planning issues. As I did the last time I was before you, I just kind of dumped the kitchen sink in just because that way it's on record and people have more time to consider it. But really, the few planning related issues have to do with, well, one actually overall issue is that on page 8 of the red line version, it says that no temporary licenses are issued after February 28th, and I'm thinking that that just ought to change. I don't know why it's there if we're still in the process of figuring out what's required for temporary licenses. And then also that distributor transport only permit license is a type of license under a distributor. It's like there's at the state level and now at the local level, there's distributor, and then below that is a subcategory of distributor where literally it's because the only people who can transport are distributors, and they realize in order to allow cultivators to transport their own product, they have to create this little thing. That's going to eventually change, but that's an important thing, and it needs to be referred to anytime you're talking about distributor or distributor transport only. There are a lot of comments in the working group, and I'm a member of 5 different working groups, and I think that it is helpful for staff to go back and look. I think we have a very good working relationship with staff in terms of delineating issues, and I would support the comments that are made in that document. Thank you.
Thanks.
Good morning, Paul Hansberry from Laytonville. I'm part of the working groups that are working with microbusiness, and a number of the other working groups as well. And my partner Susan and I have been to Sacramento numerous times with the advisory committees and what have you. You're not alone. The state doesn't know what a microbusiness is yet either. Currently, what they have is that there's 10,000 square feet of cultivation. That's the only restriction. For a distributor, for a manufacturer, and a retail, you could have 20 tons. There's no limit to it. So what I was proposing, and I proposed it to the advisory committee at the state level, and they were excited about it, was, I beg your pardon? Sure. Was what cannabis may be used. You can pick three, and what if you don't pick cultivation? What if you just pick distribution, manufacturing, and retail? Where do you get your material? All right. So if the self-sourcing, self-distributing, if cultivation isn't one of the activities that you choose, you have nothing to manufacture or distribute. So here's a solution that I came up with, or my partner and I came up with, that all microbusiness licenses can only outsource material that cumulatively would equal 10,000 square feet of cultivation. That would mean 4 people that have 2,500, 2 people that have 5,000 square feet, or 1 that has 10,000, or any combination of that to get up to 10,000 square feet. If you choose cultivation, and you're able to do that as well, you still, since as a microbusiness, you can still bring that in. What this does is it furthers the sense of community. A huge distributor may not be interested in someone who only has 2,500 square feet, and they still have to pay, the distributors will have the overhead, and they will charge them 35% on top of what they're charging for that. So the price goes way up. And this is an effort to keep the community together so that it regulates the prices, so that I could be a distributor for a cottage cultivator and take it down there for far less money than what the other would charge. Also, it would be a central thing for testing, because the testing agency has to come to the distributor. So rather than, it would come to one central place rather than going to another major distributor at a much higher cost with much higher overhead. All right, microbusiness licenses, which include, okay, I talked about that. Aside from that, and on top of that, if a microbusiness is doing manufacturing and the methods that they're using is capable of doing so, they may additionally purchase material that has been tested for compliance and failed, not from pesticides, but from natural pathogens like mold or mildew, where the alcohol or the heating process would remediate this so that they would be able to salvage at least some part of their crop instead of sending it off to be destroyed because it failed their microbiological testing. So this, again, is a sense of community and helping out your neighbor. Somebody has a crop failure, they get mold on their cannabis that you can remediate. They have the ability to do something with it. So this is all in at the last page here, and I think that redefining microbusiness, instead of trying to shoehorn it into an existing, it should be a separate license, not necessarily considered. You could align it with a cottage industry or a home occupation, but it still should be its own separate thing. Thank you.
So you said the second to the last page. What document are we talking
sorry,
about?
on the comments?
On the comments?
Yes. It's a two-sided document, so it's the last 2 pages.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
This one, right? Yes. Please state your name.
If you have a speaker card, that would be great.
I just gave him.
Oh, perfect. Thank
I have
you.
another one for
Could you just 1 second to give him, and then I'm happy to move on. Sure.
Okay.
Good morning. My name is Jude Tillman. I live in Fort Bragg. I own Dragonfly Wellness Center, work with Mendocino Cannabis Industry Association, and I'm on several of the county working groups. I applaud and I'm grateful to county staff for all the work you've been doing and their kind words this morning at, I think, leaning in the direction of flexibility, which I'm going to take a couple bites of the apple at the podium this morning because there's so many details, and I know that this has just landed on you. We're living with it for months and months. Actually, 4 years I've been working on this in Sacramento and in Ukiah, and here the details are horrendous. They can make you exhausted and get lost. But I do want to give a little bit of a framework of where we're at in time right now. We're at the beginning of April, and at the beginning of March, the state and many counties around the state decided they needed to take stock of how has Prop 64 been effective or not effective in ending the underground market and beginning to bring everybody into compliance and into regulation and make this not a law enforcement issue, but rather a legitimate commercial cannabis activity in the largest market in the world. And some of the efforts had to do with March 1st when State Senator Mike McGuire, along with Assemblyman Jim Woods, held a public hearing in Ukiah. Now, present at that hearing were elected officials from our county, Sonoma and Humboldt counties, heads of every state cannabis regulatory agency, Bureau of Cannabis Control, Department of Public Health, California Department of Food and Agriculture, and then that tax agency with the impossible acronym, CDTFA. Also present were DA Dave Eister and law enforcement officials and over 200 community members. The public hearing was billed as a review, how the first 2 months worked. The statistics were out and everyone nodded their heads. It's been a dismal failure. It had been a dismal failure, and for some of the reasons that were captured by Sonoma Agriculture Commissioner Tony Liniger. And I quote, "If the overall goal of the state program to legalize and regulate commercial cannabis, if the overall goal was to create a regulatory scheme to favor corporate big dollar industry, we've succeeded. If the goal was to create a regulatory pathway for our existing small cultivators, our small entrepreneurs, dispensaries, processors, we've failed. Any other ag industry," he says, "would be run out of business," end quote. And this was echoed in the LA hearings that they had, the San Diego hearings. This has been echoed in all of the Cannabis Advisory Committee hearings in Sacramento. So every head of the departments that are regulating this industry nodded their head at the end of this session, and they said, yes, it's been too onerous, too expensive. And last Saturday, we had a 5th District Candidates Forum in Comchi, in which very pointedly every candidate was asked, what would you do to make this work in Mendocino County? Every candidate for 5th District. They all said some variation of this. Streamline it, simplify it, reduce the high levels of taxes and permit fees, make it easier to bring people into compliance. Because right now we have a tiny fraction of all the people we know are doing commercial cannabis cultivation and business are actually coming above ground and entering into the legal climate. So in this tendency on the part of everybody to move towards being a little bit easier on all of these ordinance regulations is a good one. And I'm going to take another bite of the apple and get specific. Thanks.
Do you have a speaker card or?
I'm sorry.
Oh, that's okay. Well,
Susan Tibbin, T-I-B-B-O-N.
and please say your name into the
Absolutely,
thing
thank
so
you.
it's on our tape,
Good
too.
morning, Susan Tibbin, Laytonville. Along with Paul, I am part of a number of the working groups, as well as making many trips to Sacramento, and microbusiness is still, it's a work in progress, so we appreciate your patience. I'm referencing the last 2 pages of the Victoria Davis stakeholder input document. I would like to second emphatically Paul's comment. Microbusiness represents the largest and fastest growing segment of small business, not only in California, but the whole of the United States. It was an interesting statistic. And as such, it represents a stable tax base for the county. So it's to our advantage to streamline the process and recognize the very unique nature of microbusiness, which touches every aspect of the industry. So please, let's look at a separate designation for microbusiness. In terms of fees, this is still a very, very heavy lift, particularly for microbusinesses. We are not heavily capitalized. Most of us are just 1 or 2 people. We've been doing this for decades, and we'd like to continue. So in terms of fees, please be aware that many of us may only be able to cultivate 2,500 square feet, or choose to only cultivate 2,500 square feet. But the minimum tax is 10,000 square feet. So we'd like to see an adjustment. We'd like to see taxes, as many other businesses, based on our gross receipts. And with track and trace, that's going to be fairly transparent and an easy thing for all of us to do. Thank you very much.
I do hope everyone is aware that the taxation issue is not the purview of the Planning Commission.
Would you clarify? I know we're not
in other
allowed to
words,
ask.
that's something for the supervisors to
Thank you.
decide that kind of stuff. We're kind of on the land
Thank
use
you.
part.
Good morning. My name is Rick Sutherland. I'm from Comsey, and I'm addressing the 1,000-foot setback. I'm probably the one that instigated this whole thing. I'm in escrow on an industrial property that's less than 1,000 feet away from a Head Start school. It's off of Ore Springs Road, very close to State Street, and it's in an existing industrial park, the largest one in Ukiah. And quite a bit of that park will be off limits because of this 1,000 feet rule. And I have a photo here. The road that accesses the facility that I'm in escrow on dead ends. And it's a 40-foot drop down to a Head Start school. There's no way a 3 or 4 year old child could go up that hill. So we were thinking of, people were asking what an example of an exception. I've had 3 supervisors go out there, look at the facility. It's totally fenced, barbed wire, cyclone, three large buildings that are totally secure. And they agreed, there's no way those kids can walk up this hill. And why would they? They're 3 years old. So this is a prime example of an exception where 1,000 feet is just ridiculous. And all the other buildings that are there, they're out of it too. So this will be a problem that'll pop up. Willits had this problem, and they eliminated the setback in the city. They have city rules there, because all the properties that could have been done with this were out of the setback. So practical thinking on that. Now we'll be in a position to serve Comsey, all those hill places. You know, we're going to have my particular thing is to do processing there, and it's a perfect place for it. If everyone wanted to come out there and look, I'll send a photo here, an aerial, and just as it goes around, here's the property, here's the dead end road, and the school's down here. It's right off the reservation. You want to send that around, and you'll see if the access road goes and stops. That's it. There's no way to go any farther. You have to go.
Hey, Rick, you need to speak into the microphone.
Yeah, could you go back to the microphone?
Sorry, got excited there. So anyway, it's a perfect example. And as Marilyn said, that if you take these at, each one should be looked at. There shouldn't be like a rule, you know. I can see where you would overdo it with 1,000 feet because you're being overreactive. But you should look at each one. Now, I'm gambling because I'm in escrow on this thing, and my money's going hard today, as a matter of fact. So I'm just gambling that cooler heads will prevail. We are all in business of one type or another. So, I mean, is it always going to be perfect? No. No business is. So anyway, be open-minded. There'll be other things like this that'll come up. Not just setbacks, but this is an organic ordinance. And things are going to come up. And you're going to have to make decisions. You're going to have to be flexible. I'm being flexible. I'm going hard. You know? Thank you.
Okay. You don't have to hand it another speaker card. Just say your name.
I can keep filling them out. I'm still Jude Tillman, and I know this is an awful lot to lay on you. I mean, it's the levels, the number of hours we spend going over the details. I'm hoping that you will take the time, though, to read our working group's recommendations. We tried to make it really easy. We didn't reproduce the entire staff memo. We just took their parts and put them in italics, and we put our parts in bold so that you could distinguish between what the staff was recommending and what we were suggesting as changes. Some of the things that we really need to look at in terms of the microbusiness license is allowing multiple premises, and this is very critical. Let me explain what I'm doing and what I've been lobbying for years. Is that I have a very highly medical facility. We focus on and we do huge amounts of public education on the medicine of cannabis. A lot of patients who are being helped with cancer, Parkinson's, epilepsy, PTSD, etc. We have tons of testimonies and videos and things like that. Everybody knows we're about medicine. We're trying to do something they're doing in other states and in other countries, which is bring together people who manufacture cannabis medicines, infused products, tinctures, things like that, with the doctors and the nurses that are working with the patients and are using cannabis as an option, that's a viable option in place of pharmaceuticals in many cases, and with the cultivators and the people in the community to mix and match conditions, whether it be Parkinson's or whatever, with specific medicines. We need to be able to source a variety of already tested, already in the state track and trace system raw materials. We need to be able to source from many places so that we can create these new and unique medicines. This is something that Mendocino County would be uniquely good at doing in the larger nationwide cannabis market. We need to add processing as an accessory activity. The whole notion of an accessory use is a wonderful one that Planning and Building has introduced to us, this concept of accessory use. If you can have a subcategory that allows you to do other things besides what's specifically stated in the leading two license activities, which is retail, adult use, and medical, and cultivation. Those are the leading activities under a microbusiness license. And then underneath that have the manufacturing, non-volatile, and processing and things like that underneath that. That's going to allow us on a very small scale, we're talking very small scale, be able to be very innovative, creative, and stay in the medical marketplace from my perspective. Just a word about setbacks. Remember, please, that we don't have all the players in the county infrastructure on the same page. Law enforcement's not exactly happy with the law. Not everybody in law enforcement is. So what you might be seeing out there isn't necessarily a result of cannabis activity, but we really, really have to end prohibition and bring people into the regulated market to end the kind of things that I think you're afraid of. So that's why we've got to streamline and simplify all of these regs and reduce the costs of people getting involved. There's expanded zoning allowances, critical. Go to zoning clearances instead of administrative permits whenever possible. Oh, I might have to take another bite. Thank you.
Thank you.
I just have one specific additional comment, and thank you. This is Hannah Nelson again. With respect to the same premises for micro businesses, the state requires that you have 3 out of 4 activities, and that currently the language at the state says on the same premises. They've recognized that that was not well thought out, especially for rural communities, because we don't have the kind of zoning that would allow some of the uses in some of the places, except perhaps some of the accessory uses. So they're recognizing this, and in fact, the emergency regulations just came out for shared facilities for manufacturing, and the state is looking at now going to be allowing micro businesses to have some of their activities on the same premises, and some of them maybe at a shared facility if there's a shared facility license, etc. So I'm suggesting a very easy technical fix to the current language, which says it must be on the same premises. If we insert the terms unless and until the state provides otherwise, then we're not going to have to come back and re-amend once the state changes this, because I know they are. So it's just a small technical fix, but it's an important one, because we don't want to have the 1 to 2 to 3 month lag time when the state fixes this, that we have to come before this board and then before the Board of Supervisors and then 30 days and blah, blah, blah. So if we could just add that, we're solving the problem before it happens. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good morning, I'm still Paul Hansberry. With regards to the separate, it's in the statute that for microbusiness that it has to have one on the same premises. We were at the advisory committee up in Sacramento, and we came up with a different, innovative way of looking at that. Instead of defining a premises as a location or a parcel, defining a premises as ownership. So if you own or lease or rent, it's still ownership, various places, you could be issued an accessory license for those different locations, and if you were under the ownership of them. This is outlined briefly at the last on this document here on the last page. So the premises may be defined by ownership, not strictly a single parcel. By interpreting the premises this way, it allows for an accessory license or a sub-license under the microbusiness license, because the statute also says that it has to be under one license. But this could be an accessory license to the microbusiness for the different activities. You would only be allowed one sub-license. You couldn't have 5 different locations for manufacturing. Lease rental of the license for a more desirable, useful, or compliant facility. I know that in zoning, some counties in the state are they're saying you can only manufacture in regardless, you can only in industrial zones, which makes the microbusiness unusable at all in those parts. So that's just another way to look at it. I think we need to look outside the box a little bit, just so that we can drive adoption, and because the microbusiness could be the savior for the whole thing, because that's what everyone's been doing for all these years. They've been operating a microbusiness, not just simply cultivating. Thank you.
Just one last sentence.
One more.
Just about got it. This thing about, I just lost it between there and here. Wait a second. Getting old is not fun. Okay.
It's not easy either.
Yeah, the zoning issues are critical. I mean, it's really hard to come into a situation where it feels sometimes in the county like zoning is set in stone, when I know that, I think I might be wrong with this statistic, but I think we've got like just 6% of the county is industrially zoned. Is that right? Something like that? Not much. Yeah, it's very teeny tiny. So when you relegate certain licenses that we really need to survive to just industrial, it's basically saying what Paul just said. It's like puts us out of business. And the other thing is, speaking of going out of business, this thing about time is really critical. I know this isn't exactly your purview in terms of content, but I would urge you to give direction to the staff to expedite the changes that can be made and their new recommendations as fast as possible. The reason is I've had my temporary permits from the county and from the state since January. They're going to expire May 12th. We've got no extensions. We can't have the county deadline be where it is now. It's got to be moved back much further, because the state's not even close to getting their final ordinance done, which they were going to have done by the end of March. No way, no way. So basically, after May 12th, in my case, and many of my colleagues are facing their permits and their state licenses expiring in May, they have to shut down and go out of business. That means no income, nothing. No, I can't pay payroll, nothing. Nothing will happen unless we get extensions. The state's going to extend, we're sure of it. So the county, please, has to do so as well. Since I have a little time, on the question of setbacks, please streamline the setback language. Just take the state language. It's 2 sentences. We've provided it for you in our document. Take church out because that violates separation of church and state, and there's nothing to indicate that a church being within 1,000 or 600, it should be 600 feet to be consistent with the state language. There's nothing that indicates that a church has more children than a supermarket, for example, would have there. So there's no reason to include that in the list. It's not in the state standards, so it doesn't need to be in ours. And I think that's got to be it. Thanks. Thanks a lot.
Thank you.
Susan Tibbin, Laytonville. Drilling down a little bit in terms of definitions and what's going to work to drive adoption. There's nothing that spells out where a cottage industry minor use permit would begin to be required or how applicable the requirements are. Home occupation, section 2156, states that you may have 1 employee and a total area not to exceed 640 square feet. Cottage industry, section 20.160, states that limited may have 2 employees and a total area of 1,000 square feet. General, 3 employees and a total area of 2,000 square feet. A minor use permit required. But what if there is no residence? Do the square footage requirements stated and referenced in the ordinance include the garden, the drying shed, the garden itself, the storage? The state statute limits cultivation to 10,000 square feet. A home occupation or cottage industry has no restrictions concerning production from only what can be grown on the premises. A candle maker doesn't make her own wax. So what if cultivation is not chosen? With regards to setbacks, maybe another way that we can look at it as well is, as long as the perception of criminality continues, we're perpetuating an unequal and an unfair playing field. We're not driving adoption, so perhaps we can all work on that, because it's part of what's driving the problem, I believe, is this underlying perception of criminality. Thanks very much.
Anyone else? Okay, I am going to close the public hearing. Bring it back to the commission. And what is everybody's pleasure? Do we want to go right through this document, the red line version of the document, which is actually, in my case, blue, except a couple red lines, but a lot of it is blue. And see what of these red lines or blue lines we want to keep and what out of the staff memo we want to deal with.
You're talking about the one, chapter 636 at the top.
Yes. And there is also the resolution if we need to modify that.
Well, just, I guess to start the conversation, I have no problem with lining out medical and adult use.
Right. That's a good one.
Ignore me.
I will say that I am interested in having some flexibility in the setback language of it. I think there are existing facilities that are appropriately used for these businesses, and if the setback language is too firmly fixed, we're gonna have people building different stuff so that it's, you know, plunked on a different part of the parcel and whatnot. I don't think that's really where we wanna be. I do think we have to be sensitive to the sensitive receptors issue, but I do think we need to look at our existing parcels and how they're zoned and how people are using them and try and be somewhat reasonable with that.
Could I follow up on that
Yes.
subject of the setbacks? I think the point about churches was very well made.
I agree with
And
that.
I wonder if staff knows where the inclusion of church came from. Do we have any history of why?
Yeah, I'm thinking it came from a board comment at some point. That's why it was added in. I don't honestly remember.
Okay.
So,
Deputy County Counsel Matthew Kudrowski, I'll try and take a look. I'm pretty sure that's been there from 9.31. So I think it predates this whole process. If I can confirm that, I'll get back to the commission.
It might be time to look at that and eliminate it. I don't see the reason for it, but.
the one possibility that comes to my mind is that if you're sitting and worshiping on, well, worshiping whenever, if the aroma of skunk comes floating through, it's not necessarily, I'm thinking it might have more to do with odor than anything else, you know, in a place of worship.
But, I mean, at a certain point, what if there's just a single-family home there with little children playing on the floor? I mean, you know, if there's a problem with the one, it's only the number of people that makes it different between a church and a store and a house.
You mean as far as odor?
Yeah.
Well, I have an issue with the odor because I'm dealing with it. And in my case, if I'm dusting with sulfur, it cannot go across the property line. And I don't think, and that's an odor. Yeah. And I think the same thing should be true for the odor of marijuana. It should not be able to go, it should be illegal for it to cross the property line.
Is it odor in both cases, or in the case of sulfur, is it the actual dust?
Well, it is dust, yes, versus, but it's you know, just the same. I just don't think it should cross the property line.
Agreed.
So anyway, I'm guessing that it might have more to do with odor as far as the church is concerned than anything else.
How would that differ from a barnyard?
Well, we had a big issue here with the composting facility out in Redwood Valley. And no, it wouldn't.
Because it seems a little impractical to be trying to regulate the odor.
Well, we do. We have legislation that regulates odor.
From
like composting facility, for instance.
He was mainly composting wine pomace, grape pomace, but it was the odor that was the thing that caused setbacks, not what he was using there. And I agree with that when it's a residential interface. I'm not sure I agree with it everywhere. In other words, you got to be able to compost somewhere. And so the proper zoning for that is where it should be allowed and maybe not restricted by the property line. If if there's a really strong wind that day, it may get across. But I think that's, for me, where the zoning classifications come in, that what I think people are entitled to expect to be insulated from that in their residential neighborhoods. I'm not sure in business districts that needs to be the same.
Or industrial. Yeah.
Or industrial. That's my own thing about it, that we want people to locate their businesses in business areas, whether it's commercial, whether it's industrial or whatever. And so I think we have to be accommodating to that thing and not I think that the stricter setbacks are really to protect residential uses. That's my belief about it.
I wonder if we could ask staff, if there is a complaint of odor from marijuana being grown outdoors, what would the process be? Somebody would call it in. Would there be a look? Do we still have the guy on staff with the nose? Would somebody go out and take a look or not?
If it's a cultivation site, an outdoor cultivation site, I don't remember if there's anything in the ag ordinance that addresses that. I know odor was a consideration. There is something.
There's a prohibition against offensive odor in the ordinance.
I thought so, but I don't.
But what
remember
determines
what it
that?
says.
You know, that the ag department would be enforcing that.
Right.
Deputy County Counsel, secondarily to, and Ag Department would be enforcing it if it's part of a permitted operation. And I know we looked at the wording for those provisions and tried to tie that to the same standards that were used by air quality, because the Air Quality Management District also deals with odor complaints as well. So I think, I'm not sure how often this has come up in the last year, but typically I believe there's some amount of working together between the county and air quality when it comes to odor complaints.
And if it's not cultivation, if it's processing, there shouldn't be odor at all. Or
well,
maybe I don't
there may be
understand.
odor in a facility, but the difference between, say, outdoor cultivation and then some kind of manufacturing or, you know, even trimming happening, that's going to be happening in a facility. And there's the option to do all kinds of, you know, filtration and air control. And my understanding of what's happening is that the issue with microbials and molds is so intense anyhow that it might actually be beneficial to that facility to be really, you know, cleaning the air anyways. So I'm less concerned about odors. Odor isn't an issue for me, but I'm not sure that the cannabis facilities code is the place where that's the biggest issue. It seems more like a cultivation ordinance issue to me.
So I also am in agreement that there needs to be some flexibility as far as the setback.
Yeah, me too.
Where's the actual language in the setback?
We're wondering what page the setback.
19.
What?
Page 19.
So the setback requirements under 20.243050B. And that's page 15 on my stuff.
15.
As far as the administrative permit process, that's on 19. Did you find it?
Yeah, so I'm in agreement with that.
Mm-hmm.
The red line?
Yeah.
If I may, through the chair, Deputy County Counsel Matthew Kudrowski, and looking over this and also Ms. Nelson's memo, I'm seeing a couple of places where section references might be off in terms of whether it's B or C related to the addition of the setback issue. So when we get to making a motion, I want to get direction about fixing those references. And I believe in chapter 6.36, we should have a reference to the administrative permit as well. So just, language there.
So on the first section, 6.36, there was a question about at the very last page 8 on D, about the county shall not issue temporary CFBL after February 28th. Can that be extended, or what's the issue there?
We constructed the temporary cannabis business license issued is to get something going for a short-term basis. So with the idea that if people wanted to try and get their temporary state permit, they'd have something showing they had something here. We had a cutoff date because at a certain point into this year, the assumption was people would be applying to the county for their regular cannabis facility business license. So we had no direction to extend that date from the board, and to the extent that it's necessary to do so, I would have to get more information from applicants in terms of whether or not something's saying they've applied for a permanent business license, because the issue is in how we constructed the temporaries in front of the board. We didn't want to go too far in terms of saying if you needed a use permit and you needed to have a full CEQA review of that, giving them an allowance to get started early was possibly problematic. So we put a cutoff date for that. If that date needs to be extended, I have not been presented with enough to know information to say it needs to be, and I presume we can talk about that in front of the board at that point in time.
So we could just make a recommendation to them that we think they need to look at this date, because if the state isn't ready and we aren't completely ready with the permanents, I kind of think we have to continue the temporaries.
Some of the issue with even the temporaries didn't include all, scenarios where if there was a use permit involved anyway. We had to get some clearance to see how far could we go before sticking our necks too far out in reliance on giving a temporary approval now, based on a future approval later, and what do we lose as part of that process. So I can work on language later on once we're ready for recommending the board revisit that in particular.
So, correct me if I'm wrong, but it seems to be there's two issues. This is about applying for your temporary permit, and then under discussion we heard about temporary permits expiring, and you still can't get your state permit yet. And so how would we deal with that?
And Deputy County Counsel Matthew Godrowski, that's what I need more information about, because it's the states that are expiring. I'm not aware that ours are. We just had a cutoff date for application. So if there's a need to try and finesse that additionally to ensure that their temporaries can be continued at the state level, if they've been in our application process, I have to have more information about that.
It does seem like we're kind of constantly in a position of being out ahead of the state, and so we're always waiting for them to get something in place, and we're kind of cobbling something temporary together. So I guess what I would recommend to the Board of Supervisors is that they just kind of keep it until the state makes permanent disposition on this matter or something. I mean, just if we keep sticking these arbitrary dates in on the assumption that the state's going to pull it together by that date, this is way time consuming.
And here, in response to this, the date was set because the idea was people wanted to get something from us to then take that to the state, but by the end of February, they'd be able to have their application in for a regular cannabis facility business license. So to the extent that isn't working, I haven't had any discussion on that, and we can, again, when we get towards the end of the discussion, I'll put in an issue of revisit this particular issue in front of the board.
All right, so we'll be working on that. The other note I took was the recommendation that wording be included that would essentially say until and unless the state changes regulations. Does that make sense to you?
Deputy County Counsel Matthew Godrowski, there's an element to that does make sense to give us some breathing room for later. That being said, on that particular issue, I don't think it's necessarily as simple as just adding that. I think, and again, not saying I'm opposed to this, but I think we have to add additional language to say if you're using separate facilities, you have to be in compliance with your different zones. So there is not, if your micro business has 3 sites, what you're doing on those 3 locations all have to be consistent with what you're doing on those locations. If one of those locations would require a use or administrative permit, we look at a project as an overall project. So we look at everything would be subjected to the review at the same time. So I think there's a little more to go on with there. I think it's, and then secondarily, does the county want that? It's the state can say they want separate facilities. The county can make its own more restrictive rules. So here, this one level is board direction. Second issue is if we get direction from the commission, I think we'll need some more wording to try and solve that issue.
Well, I have a hunch that's going to come up at the board meeting again. So, one thing I'm a little confused on is micro business, and I'm wondering if it shouldn't say cannabis micro business, because micro business can apply to a lot of things, and yet we're just dealing with cannabis here. Or is it, maybe I'm forgetting the definition. Is it in the definition somewhere what micro business is?
So there is a definition, but also remember under this section of code, it speaks specifically to cannabis facilities code. It's
Okay.
under that, so
All right.
I think we're good.
Solves my problem.
But on the subject of micro business, there are a number of sub-issues that we heard about from the public, and the idea of being able to source the material without cultivating it being one, and some of the others. And I really think that all of those issues we should pass on to the board and agree to pass on to the board today to decide, so that we don't hold it up. Those are the sort of the business issues that we're not as in touch with as the board members, and I think it would be smart of us to just let them handle that part.
I support that view.
One of the suggestions that was made by staff was to, after whatever we resolve with this resolution, but to take the entire package that was given to us at the late moments and pass that on to staff, and then we should be deciding, should they make adjustments to the ordinance on their own and give it to the board, or should they bring it back to us? I would suggest that we take the entire package, just what you indicated, give it to the staff and let them digest all this material, integrating all the business aspects to it, and then making the adjustments that need to be made to go back to the board. And that's how we would deal with this material that we've been given.
I'd like to see that happen too. Any way that we could expedite this would be appreciated. There are a couple, I wanted to just kind of dive a little deeper into the micro business issue because I'm not convinced that it's going to actually work for people the way that it's written here. I'm on page 14 right now under section F. Micro businesses, subsection 7, where it's talking about micro businesses may be allowed in any zoning district. And I'm actually going to stop right there because when I compare that to the chart on page 17, I'm not seeing that micro business being allowed in any zoning district.
So, if I may, this is the reason that it begins with notwithstanding is notwithstanding what's in that table. This is one of the exceptions we're talking about. Okay. So the table sets the standard for, in certain zones, a micro business would be allowed, flat out. And here we're looking at an exception to that, saying in any other zoning district, micro businesses will be allowed under these conditions.
Okay, great. Thank you for that. So. Under the conditions that it qualifies as a home occupation, which we know is limited to 640 square feet, which is small, quite small. And I could see if somebody was just doing their manufacturing in 640 square feet, but I'm thinking about if they're doing their cultivation, I'm just wondering if we need to spell out and allow for cultivation outside the 640 square feet and also allow for any kind of other like accessory ag uses like tool sheds. I just want to make sure that that 640 square feet is not supposed to incorporate all of the activities that would be happening under the microbusiness permit.
So, Mary Lynn Hunt, Planning and Building, how staff would view it currently is that if you have a cultivation permit, depending on the size, you're allowed to do processing as an accessory to that. Those two uses really don't fall within the home occupation or the cottage industry. They would be a separate entity, and only the manufacturing or the of the product would then be part of the home occupation. We can certainly, I know it's a recommendation in one of the memos that came in, and we can certainly, you know, take that and go further if we need to. That's something we will definitely take a look at if we need to define it even more so.
Mm-hmm.
But right now, the cultivation processing is separate from what the home occupation or the cottage industry would be, as far as square footage.
Okay. Yeah, I would appreciate that being looked into, especially in light of the comments that came in, just so that we can try and make the microbusiness work for people. You know, the home occupation does not require a use permit, correct?
Correct.
It's just the cottage industry that does.
Yes.
So that brings up another issue for me, is that now we're introducing another use permit that would be necessary. And I think generally the trend that I've been seeing in all the cannabis ordinance work is that we're trying to kind of go away from the use permits and more toward administrative permits. So I just want to be mindful that if someone needed to operate their micro business in something larger than 640 square feet, so if they're up toward, you know, 1,000 or 2,000 square feet, we are adding another use permit. I think I have a desire to try and streamline that more for them, but I know that wouldn't be consistent with the rest of the zoning code, which does require use permits. And so I don't know how to fix that, but I'm concerned that this might not work well for people.
So in keeping in line with our existing home occupation and cottage industry uses, that is correct. A use permit is required for cottage industry, limited in general. So if we did that, we would be, I'm not sure how we would change that.
Okay. I think maybe that's where one of the suggestions was coming from several of our speakers, is to just create a new, I guess it would be a new category that would be called micro business, and not try and make those conform to home occupation or cottage industry. So again, I don't know what the answer is, but maybe thinking down a couple of different tracks and trying to figure out how to make this actually work for people. Because again, these are our small cultivators, and I really want to see this work for them. So that's
I would be careful about being inconsistent with the rest of the, and I've lost my term, but anyway, with the rest of our rules, our regulations.
That would regulate other businesses in the cottage
because
industry.
we are talking about competition here, and you're going to get complaints if you make too many exceptions. As a grower, a grape grower, there's a lot of permits, and I think Jim Little and myself both said, well, welcome to our world when this started, because and I'm not, you know, I'm torn. I don't think we can make too many exceptions, but at the same time, I do want to see, you know, our cannabis growers come into the legal world. But I'd be careful about that.
No easy answers on that one.
Any more discussion on the red line copy?
I was going to say, in the meantime, if there are decisions we need to make about this copy, what are they, and let's make them. And if not, then let's move on to whatever else we need to do.
I'm in agreement. I don't have any other issues. I would just like to say that I agree with Roger's comments about, you know, giving this to staff and expediting it.
So do we have a motion on our resolution here?
Madam Chair? Deputy County Counsel Matthew Kudrowski. Well, I have a couple of things I can run through that I think I've heard, and then you can let me know if I'm missing something.
So we can clarify that motion.
Right. But then secondary to that is the issue of what holds up what. And the general rule is that if something wasn't presented to the Planning Commission for discussion, and that comes up at the board level, that would require it to come back to Planning Commission, or at least be referred back for the commission to have its opportunity to comment on that before being resolved by the board. In terms of all the things, if either we can get, doesn't have to be part of the resolution, we can get general direction from the commission to review and see if it wants to put forth anything from the written comments to the board. But generally speaking, since you've been talking to the people who submitted those in writing and had an opportunity to review those, if those issues were changed at the board, either by staff's action or by the board's action, that wouldn't require it to come back to the Planning Commission. So you can just give us general direction on what to do with those written comments if there's nothing in particular that you want to discuss right now. And we would consider those as having been reviewed by the Planning Commission.
Gotcha.
There was one more specific that I just remembered, but I'm having trouble finding it in here. So if somebody sees it, can you point out if there was a requirement for micro businesses to use product grown on site? I think we heard about that, but I'm having trouble locating it.
Yeah,
I believe it's
that's in the choice of three things, and what if you don't choose cultivation?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so that's the issue, and I would like to see the board very specifically look at that, since we're recommending redefinition of microbusiness that could potentially not include cultivation. We need to provide for some way for our cannabis business people to actually get that product on site if they're not cultivating it. And I thought that Paul's idea about how to basically ally yourself with other micro businesses was very intriguing and kind of stayed within the intent of micro business. It also occurs to me that defining it that specifically might also in some unintended way be limiting to micro businesses. So I would like for the board to specifically look into that issue in more detail.
Yeah, was that requirement a county requirement or a state requirement to have?
Choose the three.
To choose the three.
Oh, to choose the three, that was the state. I think they weren't very clear if you could just choose 3 or 4 before. They moved to 3 or 4, and so have we. And the issue of, for us, the issue for micro businesses, and I can let Marilyn speak more to it in more detail, has been if we're allowing them in every zone in the county, what are the parameters that's workable under? And so looking at if you're primarily in distribution, depending on what your site is, that may not be a great thing. If we're talking about you're 5 miles up a dirt road, and what are the parameters that's okay? And that's why we're looking right now and settling on home occupation and cottage industry, because we have established rules for how those work. And setting up something beyond that probably requires more review of our codes and revision, and in all likelihood, additional environmental review of what you're allowing by right on various locations. So since we've already have provisions talking about certain sizes of what you can or can't do within next to your home, that's a pretty easy thing we can work with. When you get beyond the issue of what's related to your a 5,000 square foot manufacturing facility unrelated to any cannabis being cultivated on site, that's getting further afield from what we would typically allow on a rangeland parcel, for instance.
So speaking to cultivation, we've had the discussion too. Do we really want to limit it to just cultivation on site? So we're still, giving us direction to look at that further. We will definitely do that.
Well, I would agree. Yeah, we should look into it further.
I do too.
So my list would include 6 things at the moment, specific things. First, and there are two issues I raised earlier. One, I think we need to make reference to the administrative permit process for setback reduction in 6.36.020. That's an oversight on our end. And then related to that, I'm seeing some paragraph references that are outdated given the changes that have happened. So they're referring to the wrong paragraph. From today, I'm seeing recommending to the Board of Supervisors to revisit the issue of the February 28th cutoff date for a temporary cannabis facility business license. Reviewing the issue of allowing multiple sites for one facility in terms of whether they can have one license on different locations. The possibility of specifying sizes for micro-business. And I think this is trying to figure out what we can do to allow different, and I think I'm missing some language in that, so I might ask the Commission to clarify that issue. Lastly was this issue of how micro-business could happen without cultivating on site. So the issue of micro-businesses, am I missing something that the Commission was directing? Beyond cultivation.
Cottage industry is requiring a permit.
So
And the square footage inside that.
Yeah, and which activities would count toward that square footage restriction? Because if they're if under micro business they're choosing 3 or at least 3 different activities, which of those 3 activities count toward the square footage?
if there's no other specific direction, I might ask for a 5 or 10 minute break to write those up so they're a bit more clear and then can be inserted into the resolution.
Works for me.
Thank you.
You ready?
Okay, so we have 2 sets of minutes to approve. We'll take first the October 19th, 2017 minutes.
Excuse me, Madam Chair, just to confirm for the record, we're tabling the ordinance changes so you can handle minutes, and we'll come back to those.
Yes, we will come back to that, but we wanted to give you a little more time to review. So we have the October 19th minutes.
And I would like to ask for a correction, a fix of some kind for the last page. Under approval of the April 20th Planning Commission minutes, we have 2 statements, and I don't know why.
Oh, the 2 upon motions?
Yes.
I did notice that myself.
Yeah, there's a little problem
And one is seconded by Commissioner Nelson, the other is seconded by Commissioner Ogle, so I don't know, since Nelson was absent, according to the front page.
Okay, well,
This was-
why don't we just correct that to,
Scratch the one that says seconded by Commissioner Nelson?
Yes.
Yeah. Then it all makes sense.
any other corrections to the October 19th minutes?
No. They were very good.
We need a motion.
I would move to accept the October 19th minutes with a correction made to the last page.
Second?
All in favor say aye.
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 All those who abstain, aye.
And any noes. Next, we will take the March 1st, 2018 minutes. Any corrections or additions to those minutes?
Yes, I actually have something, and it's a little more of a concept than a necessary fix, but on page 3, we have the statements of people regarding an application. Well, let's see, actually on page 2. And I think that in both cases on page 2, the actual applicant also spoke in favor of their application, but they're not identified in the minutes. And it seems to me that we need to identify applicant statements as distinguished from the public. We do that with staff. We give their name and their title. And I think that the applicant should also be identified. So I think
Just
it was
by
Eric.
comma, applicant, right?
Yeah. Eric Mays, I think, was one, Carolyn Norris. So if you all agree with that, then there's that. And then there's another one that I think we need to look at on page 3, and that was Tom Allman's comment. I think to leave it that Tom Allman spoke in support of Flo Kana gives an impression that wasn't quite true. He came to, as I recall, and somebody may have better words than I, to state his support for their attempt to comply with the regulations. And it wasn't that he was just in favor of their project. So if we could add some words like that, I think it would be much more professional representative of his comments.
So you would like it to say something like in support of Flo Kana's compliance efforts or whatever?
Yes.
Chair Hultkamp,
Yes.
if I may, I think, and I don't remember if you stated this, I think it should also reference them as Sheriff
Yes,
Tom
that's
Allman.
true too.
Yes.
That's right.
Any other comments or corrections?
No, that was all. The rest of it was great.
Then we need a motion on this, on these minutes.
You looking for a motion?
Yeah.
I may, so move.
I'll second.
All right, all in favor of approving the March 1st minutes as amended, say aye.
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 And I'll abstain.
I abstain also.
Okay, and 2 abstentions. And now, if you are ready, we will return to item 6 or 7D and our amended resolution.
So the resolution remains the same into the paragraph 3 of the therefore be it resolved, which currently ends after the words Exhibit A. I would then recommend inserting after A, comma, with the following additional recommendations. Adding a new paragraph A, making changes as necessary to section 6.36.020 to refer to the administrative permit for a setback reduction. A new paragraph B, updating section and paragraph references as necessary. Would insert a new paragraph 4. The Planning Commission recommends that the Board of Supervisors consider the following issues. Paragraph A, extending the February 28th, 2018 deadline for application for a temporary cannabis facility business license. Paragraph B, allowing microbusinesses to operate on multiple premises. Paragraph C, specifying what activities are included within the square footage of a home occupation or cottage industry microbusiness. Paragraph D, allowing microbusinesses to operate without cultivation. Paragraph E, other issues raised and comments presented to the Planning Commission.
More will be revealed when we get the minutes.
And that's, so I have that typed up and I'll present that to Victoria.
The church, question of church?
Do we have, I did not know that we had specific, consensus
Maybe we
of the
don't.
Planning Commission about
Maybe we don't.
whether to revisit the church issue.
I think we're agreed that the church is not an issue. Yes?
How are you, Commissioner Nelson?
Okay, that's
And
fine then.
I would leave it up to the supervisors myself.
Yeah, fine with me.
Okay.
And that issue was
I'm always
presented in
in
written
favor of
comments
hunting.
Right.
to the Planning Commission, so that it is covered by that general
Okay.
as well.
So assuming that everyone is in agreement with our proposed language, do we have a motion?
I so move.
Second.
All in favor? Or I guess you should do a roll call here.
Commissioner Hall,
Yes.
Commissioner Purnell,
Yes.
Commissioner Warner,
Yes.
Commissioner Nelson,
Yes.
Commissioner Kruger,
Yes.
Chair Holtkamp.
Yes.
Motion carries 6-0.
Okay. Next, we have matters from staff. Are there any further matters from staff?
I don't believe so. Unless anyone has questions. I want to talk about our department maybe a little bit. We're almost fully staffed with planners again, so that's a good sign. And if you notice, you had quite a few more items on the agenda this morning, so I think we'll be seeing more of that as we go forward. I feel pretty good about our staff right now. I think we have a good group and everyone's coming up to speed very quickly, and hopefully everyone's being helped. And if you have any comments though about if you've heard anything out there, we'd love to hear it, because good and bad, it's all good for us to on a learning basis. So do let us know if you hear anything. We'd appreciate it.
So, hearing that request, I've been working on the other side of the desk, so to speak, and with a minor use permit as well as a building application, actually a couple. And the staff has been very helpful and quite efficient. Archaeological Commission threw a rock in the middle of my minor use permit, but we got that solved with the help of staff. So it was nice to work with everybody.
And you've probably noticed that when you come into the counter, it's usually pretty busy. Our counter's been very, very busy, and I know that building staff is. They've really increased their numbers also, and they are extremely busy, both at the counter and in the field and doing plan reviews. So it's a lot of production going on over there.
I didn't have a lot of wait time.
Good. That's good to know.
And I've heard some very nice things from fire survivors who are trying to, you know, make their way through this process, that I don't know that they always get exactly what they want, but they feel like people are being nice to them and explaining things properly. And
that's important. A couple of weekends ago, there was the Coming Home Expo that was held out at the college with a lot of participation by businesses and different nonprofit groups. And there was presentations by our chief building official, Mike Oliphant. He did a wonderful job. I felt like he was the rock star of the day, because when he was done, he had a line of people that wanted to talk to him. So he was busy all day long. But we had, I don't know if the numbers were what they expected to be in attendance, but I know myself and several other staff members from planning and the building department, we were busy talking with people all day. It wasn't all about fire stuff. It was very interesting because a lot of people were there who were not fire survivors. They were from other communities being proactive for, you know, information about how they can better protect themselves. So we saw a lot of that. It was a very nice day, and I think it was a good thing to happen in our community.
In matters from the commission, I believe Commissioner Nelson had something he wanted to.
Well, in a couple of occasions, I've referenced the Community Foundation and their listening tour. I forget. Thank you, Marilyn. On a couple of occasions, I've mentioned the Community Foundation, our listening tour, you know, about housing, and so I brought the report to you guys.
And I'm looking forward to reading it.
Yeah, it looks very informative.
Anything from other commissioners?
Yeah, I did have a thought. Actually, it's been a thought for a couple of months, and that's regarding follow-up on approved projects. I saw this morning that there's a building going up at the near the Jensen truck stop, and it's nice to see that approved project is taking some shape. But there are so many projects that have been approved, and I don't see anything happening, and I just feel disconnected from them. And I wonder if in the future we could think of a way to occasionally give us a report on some of the things that we've approved. One that comes to mind, and it was last year, I believe, was the low-income housing project from HCDC on Brush Street. And I don't think anything's happened there, and sometime we'd love a report. I would.
Okay.
Thank you.
And we can certainly do that, and I agree. We've not seen anything on that site either. From what I've heard, that maybe some of their funding fell through, and they're looking at some alternatives. If you notice on the north side of the street, there is an apartment complex that has broken ground. Okay. That was an approved project that was not subject to use permit, so they're going full bore at this moment, I believe. And yes, the project at Jensen's Truck Stop is going forward. I would be happy to make a list of different things that you have reviewed over the last couple of years and see where they are at in the process.
That'd be great.
And it doesn't necessarily have to be an oral report, does it? If we're short on time, just something simple in writing.
And on that same topic of follow-ups, last year we heard a project, and I think it was a gravel mining project, and there were some mitigation funds, some oak mitigation funds, and staff was going to be looking into where that money would actually go. Yeah, that's ringing a bell with you guys. Yeah. Because it was, I think in the conditions it said it was going to go to the state fund, but the state fund was defunct, and so staff was going to be looking into where that could go locally. The Resource Conservation District was suggested as a possibility. So getting an update on that would be great, because presumably there will be more mitigation funds in the future, and it would be great for us to know that they're going to go somewhere locally.
Very good, yeah.
Any other matters from commission? I would entertain a motion to adjourn.
So move.
I'll second it.
All in favor?
Aye.